Welcome, foolish mortals. We've talked about Jim Henson a little bit last month with the Muppets, but Jim Henson did a lot more than just the Muppets. And today I want to talk about a very important film that is a little bit underrated, even though it is a cult classic, with Labyrinth.
The world of Labyrinth.
Labyrinth was released in 1986. It was released under Lucasfilm and Jim Henson Productions. It was a collaboration between the two of them. And as we know today, Lucasfilm and Jim Henson were both bought out by Disney and are huge enterprises that they do a lot with. But it's mainly just the Muppets that Jim Henson's used with, and Star Wars for Lucasfilms, and no one talks about Labyrinth, and I forgot it was a Disney film by this technicality until I was going back and remembered it again, and I've never seen it before, so I was just even more curious to check it out. And I feel like no one would even consider this being a Disney property, even though technicality it is. When it was distributed by TriStar Pictures, which is a lot more smaller company. This was my first time watching Labyrinth. I've known about it for years, but never got a chance to check it out. And it stars David Bowie, who I was never really a David Bowie fan. I appreciated a couple of the songs, but I really wasn't into that Stardust, Ziggy Stardust, futuristic alien vibe that he gave. It just wasn't my preference. But I will say, right off the bat, that just like everyone else got a sexual awakening from this. He is very attractive. I really did appreciate his character.
Sarah, go back to your room. Play with your toys and your costumes. Forget about the baby.
I can't.
I've brought you a gift.
What is it?
It's a crystal.
I was hooked in this character. He is beautiful. We also have Jennifer Connelly, who was in The Rocketeer, which we talked about much earlier in the year. And it's not really a full Halloween film, but because we have goblins, I like to consider it a Halloween film. And I felt like it was important to talk about, and I couldn't fit it into any other categories, so it's in this one.
You remind me of the babe. Babe with the power. Power of voodoo.
When we open up, we have Jennifer Connelly, supposed to be 16, and she's just complaining about her life very melodramatically and how she's stuck babysitting her stepbrother, who's a literal baby. And I just was very surprised because she's not the best character. She just is complaining about everything, and it seemed like it was very out of touch for her being a teenager and her being obsessed with Shakespeare. But I also wasn't around during the 80s, so I don't know how life was like back then. It might have been a normal thing, or she just might have been a little bit of an outcast.
But what no one knew was that the king of the goblins had fallen in love with the girl, and he had given her certain powers. So one night, when Baby had been particularly cruel to her, she called on the goblins for help.
Listen.
Say your right words, the goblin said.
But she's obsessed with goblins, and she's calling for the Goblin King. Now, we have David Bowie as the Goblin King in this film, but when I think of goblins, I think of another Goblin King that I love very dearly.
Everybody, it's me, Jon Goblikon, and welcome to Right Now!
Jon Goblikon is my love. But alas, we don't get Jon Goblikon, and instead we get Jared, who is the Goblin King. And this is where it gets confusing because she confesses that she wants the Goblin King to be in love with her and take the baby away, but then he's not really in love with her, but he still takes the baby away and wants to turn the baby into a goblin. And it's a little bit confusing, but that starts our journey, and then we basically jump into Alice in Wonderland.
Things are not always what they seem in this place, so you can't take anything for granted.
Hey!
Hey, hang on!
Thank Thank you. That was incredibly helpful.
She has to go through this entire maze and meets a bunch of people along the way in order to get her baby brother back from her Goblin King. And there's musical songs along the way too. So you have a lot of Wizard of Oz vibes in here. You have a lot of Alice in Wonderland vibes, especially with the idea of riddles and the very weird and wacky characters that she meets along the way. So that did take away from the originality of this plot to me, because it's very comparable to other stories, but it's still unique in its own way, and it's a lot darker than both of those. There are a couple of songs that David Bowie does sing.
Dance, magic dance, magic dance, magic dance. Jump, magic jump, magic jump, magic jump, magic jump, magic jump on the knee. Slap that baby, make him pay.
They're pretty good.
But I'll be there for you as the world falls down.
But half of them are very mumbled, and I do not understand what they're saying at all.
Don't got no problem, no problem. Ain't got no suit, no suitcase. Ain't got no clothes to worry about, no clothes to worry about. Ain't got no real estate to worry about my daily. I just go in my shit, with the silliest bunch in the land.
And when it comes to our Muppets, the Jim Henson characters, they're really well done, especially with Hoggle. Hoggle was really well. I mean, he is an actor in a suit, but they put so much detail into him.
Nothing, tra-la-la. Your Majesty, what a nice surprise.
Ludo is also has a lot of detail on him as well.
Ludo, down.
Ludo? Is that your name?
Ludo.
But because of the time period and them having to use the blue screen techniques, it does come off very fake at times, and it does take away from the realistic effects that they use.
Take your pretty little head tap your pretty little feet.
So that's only an unfortunate side effect, but it still is very well done. I did enjoy the movie, even though it was very strange at times and didn't make sense. They put a lot of detail into it, and the scenes by themselves are really well done. The ending was just very confusing too, but I give them a pass for it because without giving it away, it still worked in a strange sense. Not everyone's has a great character archetype, but he tried. It's a lot different from your normal Muppet features. It's a lot more darker. It has a lot of Shakespearean elements in it, and it's very experimental, but I really do love that Lucasfilm and Jim Henson did work together, and it's still really enjoyable. Not my favorite, but I would still like to see a lot more done with it today, especially because it's such a cult classic. So I don't know if I haven't gotten to research about the rights to it, if there's some tied up marketing rights that they can't promote it through Disney, or if Disney just doesn't like it and they don't want to promote it, because like, I would honestly love to see a Labyrinth attraction or something that is a throwback to it, because it would be really cool. It would be a really great way to honor David Bowie since he's passed along, and they did Captain EO. They could do something with Labyrinth and do a whole cool throwback to the 80s attraction going on. We will continue onwards though, and tomorrow we're going to talk about one of the greatest Halloween films that have ever been made so far, with Hocus Pocus. So as always, I hope you have a magical day, and I will see you real soon.